Well, today we're going to be going over our retirement income planning process. My name is Jeremy Joyner, Certified Financial Planner and Senior Wealth Advisor, Strategic Advisory Services. With me today is Michael Wellings, Communications Director.
Hello, everybody.
And as always, we want to start with our fiduciary pledge to our clients. We believe in putting our clients' interests first at all times. We believe in disclosing all conflicts of interest, all costs of doing business. Basically, we believe in putting clients' best interest ahead of our own under any circumstance. As an industry, that has not always been the case. There hasn't been a law requiring that. Well, recently, some laws have changed that state that if a financial advisor, no matter how they're compensated, if they are doing business advising retirement accounts or advising clients on retirement accounts, they have to always do what's in the client's best interest. We take the fiduciary standard very seriously, and certainly we are proud of the fact that we have always carried ourselves to this standard. So now we're going to focus on a retirement income planning process, and we're going to start this presentation discussing the 5 big risks we see as a firm. So Michael, go ahead and get started on that. What do you see as the 5 big risks?
Yeah, well, we've been proud to be in this retirement planning arena, if you will, for more than 30 years now. And so we've identified these 5 big risks that a lot of our clients have faced. Number 1 is an increased life expectancy risk. As time goes on, as medical knowledge and medical experiences get better and better, people are living longer. That's just a fact. You can't just plan for a 20-year retirement or a 15-year retirement. I mean, if you could just come to us and say, okay, I plan to die at age 83, we can't plan for that, and people are living into their 90s nowadays.
Next one is inflation risk. The cost of everything you buy is going to get more expensive. Think of yourself back in 1987, what you spent at the grocery store for a new car or a gallon of gasoline, and think about what it is today. Now project that 30 more years in the future. That is a problem for most people if not addressed. If you are on a fixed income and the cost of everything you buy doubles over the next 10 to 20 years, certainly it's going to affect your retirement.
Number 3 is a healthcare risk. So as people age, they might become a little bit more vulnerable to disease. They might be more wary of health risks to come, and so planning for healthcare, providing for healthcare is a huge risk in retirement that needs to be addressed.
It's certainly not getting cheaper. It's getting very expensive to meet healthcare needs. Market risk. This is a big one. This is probably what's in most people's mind when you think of retirement, investment, planning for retirement. The stock market, we've got one guarantee we'll make you. The stock market will go up and it will go down. And when it goes down, most people get scared and have a tendency to make awful decisions. In retirement, a 30-plus year retirement, you might go through 4, 5, 6 bear markets during that time. How do we know that? Well, they occur on average every 4 to 6 years. And finally, we have providing financial support for other family members. So Michael, as being a recent college graduate, do you have friends that have made their way back home?
It's sad to say, but I do. I have friends that, they go to college, they get a degree, and they try to enter the job force, and either they can't find a job, or they'll start their career and then get laid off, and they'll be back at mom and dad's house. If you've seen Failure to Launch with Matthew McConaughey in it, you might get a brief picture into what we're talking about here.
So that's a really funny movie, but I've been out of college for about 11, almost 12 years now, and I have a few people, they're not friends, but people I know, that have still failed to launch fully. The other aspect of providing for family members is aging parents. Inflation has gotten pretty ugly for a lot of people in healthcare costs, and those fixed incomes have gotten quite expensive, and they have trouble meeting those needs. So sometimes our retired clients have to help their moms and dads meet their basic financial obligations. Now then, don't click off yet.
Pause.
So Michael has this, he's got a degree in communications and marketing, and what he tells us is you got about a minute to 45 seconds to a minute before people just bail and they move on. Don't do it. We haven't even gotten to the best part of the presentation yet. Hang on, it's coming. In all seriousness, please do. We do think what we offer is quite unique and can certainly be beneficial to a lot of people. So Michael, let's work through the traditional approach real quick to retirement income planning. How's that typically been addressed in the past?
Right, so financial advisors in the past have looked at problems like the ones we've just described, and they said, you know what we want to do, we're going to do what's called a 60-40 portfolio allocation. So if you're a retiree, you're thinking about retiring, and you go to a financial planner, 9 times out of 10, you might get this recommendation. You might get 9 different 60-40 portfolio allocation recommendations. So what is that? Well, it's where a financial advisor will take your assets, and they'll split them up, and they'll say, okay, we're going to take 60% of your assets, and we're going to put them into stocks so they can grow. The remaining 40% is going to be placed in fixed income instruments, which are, bonds, cash equivalents, and these are designed to provide a little bit of stability in your retirement.
And you'd like to think that the industry came up with this 60-40 out of education and research and just sheer academic knowledge. The fact is it didn't. Here's how it came about. We know that stocks over time have grown historically. I think we can all agree they have grown historically. That doesn't mean any guarantees for the future, but we know they have. But for a retiree to have their money in 100% stock seems crazy. So if you had a portfolio and your advisor said you should have an all-stock 100% equity portfolio, most future retirees or near retirement or retired people will say, no, that's way too aggressive. On the flip side, they'll follow that up with, I don't want any risk. I can't lose any money in this deal. If I lose money, that means I got to go back to work. So that would be an all fixed income portfolio. So you know what the industry did? The industry said, well, if you can't be all stock and you can't be all fixed income, we're just going to stick it in the middle. 50-50, 60-40, 60% stock, 40% fixed income. The idea is you can take out 4 to 4.5% of that account out each year. So if you've got $1 million, that's $40,000 to $45,000 out each year. Increase that with an inflation rate, and you should be fine. What's the rationale? Well, if that 60% stock portfolio returns 7%, and you only take out 4.5, it grows by 3%. You're good. Nothing to worry about. But Michael, do we get the same return every single year on an investment?
Absolutely not. And so the keywords that I want you to look at right now are long term. So if you have a 30-year retirement picture, and over those 30 years, the average return rate is 6-7%, that's one thing. But if you were to take a look at, say, 5 consecutive years where your return was -2%, -3%, you're eating that negative return every year.
Industry lingo, that's called sequence of returns. And the fact is, the sequence of investment returns, when you take that traditional approach, matters a lot when in terms of your ultimate success in retirement. So can you afford to ride out a bear market? If you get unlucky, let's say you retired October 2007, you're all excited, everything looks good. The next 18 months of your life might have been the most stressful you've ever been through because the market went down 57%. So if you're in a 60% stock portfolio, your portfolio might have gone down 30% in a matter of 18 months. And I imagine you're asking yourself, did I make the worst decision ever? And the answer is, if you have time to ride out that bear market, no. Because we do know it just takes time. But what if you don't? What if you're taking income and you're selling shares of stock as that market is going down? The next issue is inflation. Can it handle inflation over the long term? Inflation is an easy problem to solve if returns are linear. If we know we're going to get 7% every single year and inflation averages 3, well, we're good. But again, sequence of returns matters. We don't know that. The other one is, what if disaster strikes? Michael, do we have something that happened somewhere around August, September this year that might have shocked some people?
Oh yeah, everybody around Houston, everybody in Texas, I'm sure, remembers Hurricane Harvey. So I think the stat was something crazy, like 80% of people didn't have flood insurance. And if you're one of those people whose homes got flooded and you didn't have insurance, well, you're in for a rough ride in the future. But discounting Hurricane Harvey, or not discounting it, but what we like to think of is do you have a situation where if something were to happen, you'd have a backup plan? What if? What if X happens? What if Y happens?
What if I'm 75 and I get cancer? Nobody's ever walked in this office, ever, in the decade that I've been doing this, that said, I'm going to get cancer when I'm 75. That obviously does not happen. But in life, it does happen. We all know it does. Can your retirement income plan handle the what if. And finally, the famous one, long-term care. We all know that the cost of nursing care, assisted living, can be quite expensive. Yes, you in some cases are able to insure that risk, but not all cases. So we need to have that conversation. Does your portfolio need to pay for your long-term care, or can you insure the risk, or do you have another way of approaching it? Those conversations have got to happen, and a 60-40 doesn't solve it. So what is our solution? Well, we spent quite some time developing this process, implementing this process, and we have lots of clients, over 200 clients involved in this type of retirement income planning process. We call it our Income in Stages Money to Last process. Yes, it's trademarked, but at the end of the day, the sole purpose of all this effort is to make sure that what happens, Michael?
You don't run out of money in retirement.
Exactly. That's it. When I'm asked, if somebody comes into an elevator and asks me, hey, what do you do for a living? I could give them a fancy answer. Well, we invest money to try and grow and try and meet retirement income needs. But in reality, what our firm does, we just make sure you don't run out of money in retirement. That's what we do. So here's how we approach it. So what's the basic, most high-level thing, Michael? You go through this slide here.
Sure. So what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to take your retirement. Right off the bat, we're going to say, okay, we need to plan for at least 30 years of retirement. We talked about earlier how people are living longer and longer, and so we want to plan for those possibilities. So what we're going to do is take your IRA account. If you have an IRA account, you might have another one. That's okay. And we're going to break it into 6 separate stages, each equaling approximately 6 years. So we have stage 1 is going to be your first 6 years, stage 2 is going to be years 7 through 12, stage 3, 13 through 18, stage 4, 19 through 24, stage 5, 25 through 30, and then our legacy, which is built for our 30-plus year retirees.
So we've stair-stepped retirement over 30 years into multiple stages. Then what we're going to do is we're going to invest for each stage differently. So you might imagine, so think of that 60-40 asset allocation, and we're going to break that up. Stage 1, remember, first 6 years, you don't want to invest aggressively or really have much equity at all for that stage, because volatility is a killer over a short period of time. So stage 1, typically about 0% stock, maybe up to 10% stock. Stage 2, usually around 40% stock. Stage 3, around 60%. Stage 4, 80% stock. Stage 5, and legacy. So I think you can see the picture we're building. The longer you have until you need those assets, the more stock you can own in a portfolio. Well, why is that? Because you have time. Time is your best friend as an investor. And the facts are completely clear. The way to succeed as an investor is to build a diversified portfolio that's very efficient, meaning it gets the best return possible for given risk you're willing to take, and then give yourself time to let it grow. Without time, it's really, really hard to achieve an investment goal. So stage 5, legacy, yes, 100% stock, but you're talking money that's not to be needed for 25, 30 plus years. So let's take a look at a deep dive into stage 1. What are the characteristics, Michael? What should the folks really pull from this?
Right. So first thing I want to highlight and reiterate is that stage 1 is going to contain about 6 years of inflation-adjusted living expenses. You might ask yourself really quick, well, guys, how do you know how much money I'm going to need for 6 years? Well, we're going to dive into that here a little bit later. Another characteristic is that these assets are typically 90 to 100% invested into fixed income, cash, or cash equivalents. Just keep in mind the goal for this stage is income and not growth. Why? Why do you think we do that? Well, first of all, we're trying to avoid market volatility as much as possible. Imagine that if you're retired and a bear market hits and you have money that you need for this year, you need next year, and if that's all invested into equities, it's going to take a really big hit. Imagine going to the bank and that money you had in there, just 30% of it was gone. How could you cope with that?
Mm-hmm.
Another reason is that in the event of a recession or a bear market, your immediate needs should be protected against market downturns. Jeremy, how often do we have a bear market?
So by definition, a bear market's a 20% drop from a prior high, and we have a bear market on average about every 4 to 6 years. On market corrections are the lesser of the two evils. Market corrections, a 10% drop from a prior high, those will occur on average every 1 to 2 years. But both of them can affect a person's ultimate result as a retiree from an income standpoint. And so ideally, you got to have adequate time horizon to get through those difficult markets. It is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when the markets turn bearish and things go down in value. As long as you don't sell, historically, you've had every opportunity and ability to recover. What happens for stages 2 through legacy? We call these the growth stages. Growth meaning not using them for income. We're trying to grow them over a certain period of time. Each stage has a different asset allocation. Stage 2, 40% stock. Now, some folks, that's still not comfortable. They may think, I want to be a little bit more conservative. I'd like something more in the 20% stock range. I just don't have the risk tolerance. Number one, we have some very good tools to help gauge risk tolerance and lots of experience with folks as retirees. So if that's the case, we can pull that back to 20% stock. This is a customizable plan. So for years 7 through 12, typically about 40% stock. Stage 3, for years 13 through 18, typically about 60% stock. So you might ask yourself, can I have a 60% stock portfolio? You guys have been railing on this 60-40. There's nothing wrong with the 60-40. It's actually a very good asset allocation. It's just wrong when you're using it for current income. That's what makes it wrong. Stage 3, 80% stock. 5, 100% stock, and of course legacy. Now both of these are 100% stock, and you might think, God, that sounds aggressive. Think of the advice you would have given 30-year-old self. Let's say you're 60 years old now. 30 years ago, you're 30, you're working, and you want to give yourself financial advice. What are the two things you'd probably say? One, save more money. Number 2, invest it very aggressively so that it can grow. Well, we've got a newsflash for you. You have 30 years until you need some of the funds that you have invested. Therefore, we believe you should invest it aggressively in a well-diversified 100% stock portfolio. So moving forward, what happens after 6 years? Is there a major shift? Do we keep things the way they are? Michael's going to detail that out.
Right, guys. So it's the natural question. We've said that each stage is designed to last 6 years, so it's a natural question. What happens after 6 years? Well, let's break it down from a fundamental standpoint really quick. So we're going to take stage 1, and after those funds are depleted, we're going to rebalance this portfolio internally. Stage 2 is going to become your new income stage. So remember, your assets in stage 2, they were about 40% in equity, but when it is shifted to the income stage, we're going to reduce that down, and we're going to make it to where it's about 90 to 100% fixed income. The reason being, once again, that is money that you need today. That is money you need in a relatively short time horizon. So you might say, okay, well, what happens to the rest of it? Well, stages 3 through the legacy are going to be shifted down in the allocation structure.
And they don't have to be shifted down necessarily. Just as I mentioned earlier, if a person's risk tolerance, if their goals, if their comfortability are such they want to remain a little bit more aggressive in their investment strategy, certainly we would have that discussion. We'd make sure there was clear understanding of what's going on, but we could keep it. We don't have to make that shift. This is not some sort of fixed pattern of investment plan. It is very customizable. And keep in mind, the goal is still to maintain around 50 to 60% stock in that portfolio overall. We still need it to grow. That's what helps the inflation problem. And so we're at this point in the actual discussion, we're going to look at what the structure looks like. On the left-hand side, you'll see years, in this case 0 through 6. On the top, you'll see the stages listed out as well as the asset allocation. And I think you'll see all 6 stages listed here. The income producing stage noted as well as growth stages. After 6 years, the growth stages remain stages 3 through legacy, while the income stage now has become stage 2. And that shift continues on years 13 through 18, 19 through 24, 25 through 30. So now you're in your early 90s, maybe late 80s. Hopefully you're thinking back to yourself, man, am I glad I hired those guys from Strategic Advisory Services. This has gone well. But in all seriousness, you have 2 stages left. You basically got an income producing stage and legacy. Now, we want to be a little bit more clear on legacy. Michael, does everybody want to leave everything they start with to their kids?
Well, not necessarily.
Right.
Not necessarily.
That's not exactly what we're referring to. Legacy is the what if. What if my home gets 3 feet of water? What if my kids move back in and my incomes need changed? What if I have unexpected long-term care costs? Now, it's not an endless pot of money, so there has to be some planning involved and some thought. But it can be a great place for the what if in life. It can also be a place where you say, I want to leave what I started with to my heirs. Well, we invest accordingly at the beginning of the plan. And ultimately, most people don't want to do that. Most people say, I want that last check, my last check, to bounce at the funeral home as my gift to my family. But in all seriousness, legacy has many purposes. We have used legacy for some unexpected financial emergencies in this year. So we expect for all folks to possibly have to do that in the future. So we've tried to address the 5 big risks, from market risk to cost of living risk, life expectancy, and providing for your family. What we want to do now is go through an actual financial plan and this is somewhat of a sample, somewhat a real life scenario. So Michael, break it down for us. Who are we looking at?
Alrighty, everybody. I'd like to introduce you all to John and Mary Samples. So John and Mary, they're 65 years old.
And at 65 years old, they're quite typical of a client of ours.
Right, and they're about ready to retire. They're reaching retirement age. They've accumulated about $1 million in retirement assets. And I want to point out real quick that this $1 million total is purely for sample purposes. We don't have a $1 million minimum at our firm. If you have $500,000, if you have $200,000, we want to help you.
Yeah, we can work with this plan, this structure can work with all asset levels from on up to the ultra high net worth down to really any level. So we just need to have a conversation.
Right. So in addition to their accumulated assets, they're expecting to receive about $36,000 a year from Social Security. Further than that, they have retirement needs of non-discretionary being $75,000 a year.
Those are the have-tos.
Those are the have-tos. That's what they need to keep the lights on in their home. They have discretionary needs of $10,000 a year, and these are the I want tos. Along with that, they like to travel. They'd like to spend $5,000 a year for 15 years. And finally, they'd like to leave what they started with, about $1 million, for a legacy to their 2 children.
So we start with our preliminary planning process. One of the things we pride ourselves on being at our firm is helping make folks' life simple. So when you first come in to meet with us, you probably have 3 things on your mind. Number 1, do I like these guys? Do I trust these guys? Do they know what they're doing? So that's number 1. If you've ever spent time with Dick Gerback, you have heard him go through that. To hire somebody, you have to like them, you have to trust them, and they have to know what they're doing. So that's number 1. So we want to answer that question. Number 2, the other question that's on everybody's mind is do I have enough? Have I saved enough money? Well, we want to answer that as fast as we can to help either get you on the right track or alleviate the concern. And we do that with this software right here. We work through some basic numbers, your current ages, Social Security, when you to start Social Security. We work through your discretionary needs, non-discretionary needs of $75,000, discretionary needs of $10,000, expected Social Security amounts. We basically start building in expected needs and when they're going to occur. Then we throw in inflation and other aspects, and we come up with the assets needed to retire. In this case, they need about $1 million, $1,036,000. Well, John and Mary just so happen to have about $1 million. So then we move on to the next step. We structure out how the portfolio should be designed to meet that need, starting with looking at inflation. In year 1, you'll see that it costs them $75,000 to meet their non-discretionary needs. 10 years later, it's $100,000. That's a $25,000 increase in needs. And if you think that sounds like too much, it's not. That's history tells us that's exactly what will likely happen. The additional needs are built in. Ultimately, it's offset with any other income sources. So we drive what is the portfolio need in that given year. So year 1, $90,000. Year 2, $56,000. Year 3, $58,000 and $60,000 and so forth. And then that in turn drives how we fund each stage. Stage 1, and instead of having that overall 60-40, we'd fund stage 1 with how much?
$298,000.
Yep.
And remember, guys, This is 6 years of inflation-adjusted income that we've allocated for stage one. So this is what they need today. This is ideally invested in 0 to 10% stocks, so it's not going to be very volatile.
Then we build in stage two, 238,000. So that is looking at years 6 through 12 of their income needs. And 3, and then 4, 5, and then legacy. All this is basically predicated and structured upon that software, and then we want to take this sort of preliminary structure and plan, and then we want to basically so again, the overall asset allocation, we want to maintain around 50 to 60% stock. But then in turn, we want to stress test this plan. This is so important for what we're trying to do. We know that we will not get 6, 7, 8% return every single year on a portfolio. Isn't going to happen. What we do know, though, is markets will be volatile, and you will have good times and bad times. We have a way using technology of stress testing that of John and Mary's plan, running it against 1,000 different stock market simulations to come up with a probability of succeeding. So in this case, they have an 84% probability of success, which means 840 of the 1,000 scenarios will be successful. Now, Michael, do all financial plans, does a financial life always work out the way you envision it?
No, it does not. Life happens.
It rarely does.
No.
I mean, I can't tell you the kinds of situations we run into. So what we will also do as time goes on, as we're monitoring this, as we're meeting together, we'll work with different techniques on the left-hand side to deal with the what if. Well, what if my living expenses are $5,000 more a year than I thought? How does that affect my probability of success? Well, if it produces a result that's low, we got to get back to the drawing board and figure some stuff out. Or what if I need to purchase a home near my grandchildren who I thought would live in Houston but instead live in North Carolina? How does that affect my chances of success? So, in conclusion, we have built out a structure for developing and producing retirement income that we think is unique and we can say has been successful over the last decade. Michael, what are some resources available to those that want more, want to know more, or maybe just reach out to us?
Right. Well, guys, we hope that we kind of whetted your appetite for retirement. And if you're about to enter retirement, we hope we revealed some things that you should be looking out for on the horizon. In the meantime, if you care to, visit our website, www.askstrategic.advisory.com. It's a place where we have a blog where we discuss various financial topics. We have a week in review video every Friday talking about the week's events and any relevant topics that we can think of. Additionally, there is a sidebar on our website where you can ask a question. So if you have a burning question just about retirement or finance in general, please feel free to type it out and it'll ping right in our inboxes and we'll respond to you as soon as we can.
Or just use the old-fashioned method. Give us a call. We'd love to talk with you. Thank you for your attention today. Michael and I both very much appreciate it. Look forward to hearing from you soon.